So I will tee the floor over to the both of you. If you could share with us a little bit about yourself and what got you into doing what you're doing today.
Hello. Hello. Okay, good morning. What got me to do what I do today? It's a very long story, but we don't have all day, so I'm just gonna cut it pretty short. Essentially, I think what the turning point for me was when I started to travel a lot. When I started to leave Singapore, and and the first place that really got me to understand more about nature and biodiversity was Africa. I never knew that animals could roam wild. Never before, apart from seeing it from my TV screen. So seeing it in real life really changed my entire worldview. And when COVID hit, I suddenly felt like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see this ever again. But it was also the time where I started to head out and look around me, around Singapore, like, just right outside the Botanic Gardens, or, even our coastal shores. I think there's a lot more that could offer. So I think that to me is really what got me to enjoy biodiversity, and to really then slowly begin to appreciate its value. And now, even till today, I'm still ruminating over the question about biodiversity's value for us as humans, and how we are so intricately linked to it. And I think that's where my whole practice, film, photography, will center about.
Thank you, Ian. How about you, Mei Ling?
So before that, I just wanted to clarify my very long titles. It doesn't make very much sense, for most lay people, like senior research fellow, what does it actually mean? So like what PingPing say, I'm a marine biologist, and I started trying to become a marine biologist when I was an undergraduate. In fact, like in Singapore, we don't offer a marine biology course. So I actually did it indirectly through life sciences, and in fact, still under the concentration of environmental biology. So nothing in my academic qualifications refer to the work that I do today. But what made me sort of stuck with it was also because of the animal that I work with. I work with this really fascinating big giant clams. They're very big. Welcome to take a look at some of the book that I wrote here later. And it kind of like just went down that path of wanting to try to help this animal by using my voice as a means to communicate like the threats, the challenges. What do we know about them? What's something interesting about them? In fact, in a very recent class, I was sharing that if you spend enough time with an animal that doesn't speak or have eyes, you will still find them very fascinating. And I think that's kind of like how I would sort of explain like how I started the work as well.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So maybe could you elaborate a little bit for us, given that our topic today for the panel is conservation and communications? Mei Ling, you just mentioned about using your voice. Could you share with us a little bit on how have you gone about using your voice to perhaps advocate for issues related to climate, or is it related to oceans? And what have been one or two challenges along the way for you, and how did you navigate that?
I think as a start, when I wanted to learn or do communication, there wasn't really a course, or there wasn't someone that I can look to. And it's kind of like some science communication is something that I picked up along the way. And it really first started as a very atypical research student. I wrote a research paper that is published behind what we call paywalls, meaning that in order to get hold of that research article, you need to pay to read it. And to me, that didn't make sense. I mean, science should be for everyone, and science should be also, communicated to an extent where it's exciting and it's fun for people. So I know that it's not necessarily how all my colleagues, all my research scientist colleagues think, but that's how I started. Like, I really wanted people to learn more about the animal that I work with. So I started through a blogging. So I started blogging first. I don't know if it's working. Stop working. I started blogging, which is I think something that was very popular at that time. So Blogspot, I think it's still somewhere in the internet. You can try and search for it. So I basically left a footprint there. But I think over the years, then I started to incorporate it into like the work that I do every day. In fact, like talking to people, talking to my family, explaining to them why I choose to do a PhD on clams. That's actually much more challenging than even trying to talk to public members of what I do. And in fact, of course, today, trying to talk to 3 of my young children, like what I do, is also another kind of communication challenge as well. So I've always been doing it in that context. And like some of the challenges, I think the first one that I mentioned is like, the audience. Every audience is different. How do you make information relatable? How do you make information relatable and relevant to them as well in your own context? Like as a scientist, I can rattle on like what are the facts, what are the numbers, what are the values, what is significant and what's not, but it won't make sense or it won't be relatable if I'm not connecting it to something that you see every day, or an analogy, or how would like the loss of a giant clam affect your life? I think that's pretty much a question that I get. It's nothing philosophical. I think it's also more about like appreciating natural heritage, biodiversity. These are things that are, can be considered intangible, but like if you are someone who appreciates nature, environment, then you would also realize that these animals are they should be there. They deserve to be there in that sense, because it's our actions and pressures that are affecting how they're doing these days. Yeah. The other challenge I would say is would be it's not easy to change mindsets. I think after a while, I realized that communications helps, making it easy to understand helps as well. But to really enact a change, it takes time. And I think being able to persevere and persist and be a pest in that sense, it's I think it's a trait that I have. If you sit me down with you, I can talk to you about clams the entire day until you probably get 1 or 2 facts in your head by the end of it.
Until we get clammed out.
Yes.
No, I think, thank you for sharing that, Mei Ling. So you mentioned a couple of points, right? You mentioned about effective communication is to make it relevant, is to make it relatable. And then you also mentioned that communicating science to the audience, part of it also involves mindset shifts, which we'll circle back to later. Because then, Ian, your medium, the medium of film, is very much more evocative, right? Could you share with us a little bit about how you approach using this medium of film to communicate about the various topics that are close to your heart? You mentioned Africa was the start of it all. So walk us through that journey.
Yeah. I think I primarily do films that are around the genre of documentary, so documentary films, and it's not so much of the kinds of where I get an actor to do something. No, so it's more like documentary that try to, and it's this very interesting space where I can get to put together facts and fiction together. So documentary has like a mix of it can be something that it's a bit acted out, enacted, right? But yet it still holds some kind of truth. And I think like with every story, let's say, if I have a story, this event actually happened to me, but I want to narrate it to somebody, I think there are many different ways of sharing that story. I could share it from the story of my perspective. I could share it from a story of a bystander's perspective. And I think film is also a medium where you could be really creative and you could even tell it from the perspective of, say, the animal itself, or, a subject, like an inanimate object, like the tree, or perhaps even the landscape. So I think there are many ways of doing this, and this is what really excites me most about filmmaking, is that how can I draw the audience, people sitting in the chairs like you guys today, to come into this world and share a conversation in just that short 15 minutes through visuals, through audio, and leave this space, leave this chair, feeling something different, thinking something different, and seeing your world a little different. And I think this is what really keeps me going. Yeah, so I think from Africa, it's like we all see like a lot of images and a lot of beautifully shot videos of Africa. I think everybody has like we sometimes know about what Africa is already, but then when I come back, I was like, oh my gosh, this place is just so amazing. But I think instead of just sharing what Africa is, I would like to share with you what my view of Africa is like. Yeah, and I think that to me is a very it's a very unique way of communication, because I'm putting myself into the film. And I think since then, the kinds of films that I have been working on were all based on this particular concept, that I would love to put myself into it, not physically like I'm starring in the film, but because of the interactions, because of the way I see that particular issue. I write the film and I direct the film in a different way, and then I shoot it in a very different way as well. Yeah. So, and I think so far to me, this is really what guides me in the way that I see how film and photography can create impact. Is how through this medium of work, I could bring people to empathize, to really feel, to humanize this particular subject. Yeah, and it all comes down to humanizing. And I think it's really like a emotional process. Like, yeah, for me, it's like, what do I feel when I see that subject, when I sit down here, when I talk to somebody, and how do I put this conversation to screen such that when you're watching it, you feel like you're also having that conversation with that someone. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the person like the CEO of the particular company. It could just really be the person sitting by the roadside, just sitting down there having a conversation with that person and allowing their worldview to bring you lots of insights. Yeah.
Could you, I really love what you just shared, which is about, you mentioned, it's about how the experience makes you feel, and then that makes you think, and then that makes you see. So you have filmed with and filmed several famous conservation personalities like Dr. Sylvia Earle, and so on and so forth. Could you share with us, in all these moments that you have been out there in nature with biodiversity, can you remember one moment that, for lack of a better phrase, like took your breath away, and describe a little bit about that moment? And if you could, take us there to that moment.
Okay, I'll try. I think one moment. I mean, there were a lot of moments that. Yeah, I think when I'm traveling, I will always feel the awe. I always let that sense of awe, that sense of wonder to just hit me. Like, wow, I didn't know it really looked like that. When I first dived in Komodo, I mean, it was beautiful. Because when I saw my first whale shark, I saw my first manta ray, and then when I see just this whole landscape of really colorful corals, that was really wonderful. But I think the thing that really stuck with me was actually walking the shores of Singapore, and of course meeting her pet subject, the giant clam. And I think really that to me was really the most eye-opening, because it's really easy to find nature and wildlife plenty outside, and this year, or rather end of last year, I started to realize that isn't it more precious to find something that is so rare that you people don't even know that these exist. So over the Chinese New Year, very very strangely, people ask me, oh, what have you been working on and what have you been doing? I said, oh, I've been like documenting our shores, and then also looking at how wildlife in Singapore, like around our forests and around our marine areas, our seas. And then people are like, huh, Singapore got wildlife? Singapore got coral? And then I'm like, yes, like really, if I tell them, oh, Africa has wildlife, oh yeah, you don't say, like literally it's there. But like when you talk about Singapore, when you talk about, they say, yeah, it is. Just look up on the tree next to you, and there you go. Maybe an oriental pied hornbill is just there, or just this morning as I drove at the junction of Tanglin, the Tanglin Gate, there was the pink-necked green pigeon just right on the tree above me, and then I was like, yeah, I see, it's all around us, but whether do we notice it? Yeah, so I think to me that really is the sense of awe, the contrast that I think in Singapore I always do believe that we are doing really, really great in terms of trying to balance urbanization and nature, and I think this is really where we could do much more. Yeah, and one of the main things that I really, really hope to do right here now at our home shores is that to get people more and more involved, to know and understand more about the local biodiversity that we have. Yeah, and this is why we should continue to care, continue to also do our part in any field that we are in. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Ian. The moment of awe from when you are walking the shores on Singapore, so you're on land, or when you are diving in the waters. Thanks for sharing that.
Actually, I share one more short story
Yes,
about
go
how
ahead.
I got to our shores. Is that during COVID, I remember I was feeling really trapped. There was no place that I could actually see the horizon. So I was really just looking for the horizon. Everywhere I go, I see like in the next tall building, I can see like into the house of another person. I felt really claustrophobic compared to like when I went to Africa. So I went to, when I first stepped onto an intertidal shore, I was like, wow, like I could see like in the distance. So this was like Changi Beach, and then I remember that morning. And intertidal shores are really well known for their sunrises because you don't see any buildings. You just suddenly see the skies change color, and then the sun just coming out from literally the horizon. And then you just look at that, and I'm just like, I never knew I could experience this right here on home ground. And I think that to me was really that sense of awe, to see the colors change, and then after that to see the tides coming in from calm, and then suddenly you got the waves, and then people just enjoying this natural, untamed landscape. Yeah, that to me was where I found a sense of awe on our shores.
Oh, that's amazing. The changing colors, the orange, the yellow, the reds. You saw that in the sunrise. That's really beautiful. How about you, Mei Ling? Can you share with us? I'm sure there have been multiple moments within your career where a sense of awe must have crept up to you. If I remember correctly, there was a CNA documentary that filmed you and the team, and I think it was pitch black, and then there was like red dots of some fertilization of a particular sea creature that is rare or something. I'm not sure if that was one of those moments that was in awe for you, but as I was watching it on my laptop, I was like in awe, like, what is this? So maybe share with us a little bit on a couple of moments that was in awe for you as you approach this climate and communications kind of realm of things.
Well, I mean, I can think of two, and they're actually both giant clam related. I know it's like you can say that I'm obsessed with them, but I think it's really because like how like working with them in the wild, working with them in the lab has really changed my perspective of like why people should care and why I care so much about the ocean. So the very first one was when I was an undergraduate student. I have not encountered any giant clam in the wild yet. So it's a bit like what Ian was sharing, like first foray into the intertidal seashores. And that very first trip was actually quite challenging as well. So we took a boat out. The island was in the middle of nowhere. We had to really very cautiously climb down ladders placed out of the boat, and then slowly land on the seashore, and then make sure you're not walking on animals. And so there was a lot of anxiety and cautiousness, because it's the very first time, and actually the seashore is teeming with life. Every step I take, there is certain life under my feet. So I have to be really cautious. I wanted to make sure that I'm not impacting. So that trip was very memorable because I was just looking around, and I wasn't expecting to encounter anything very exciting. So I think after half an hour later, I started to hear my name, and someone was shouting for me really loudly, saying, Maylin, come over here. There's a giant clam. So then that's when I slowly make my way there, and as I slowly made my way there, and as it came into my view, I was just awestruck by how natural it looked, how it should look like in nature actually, not in aquarium tanks, where I was working with them as a student at that time. It wasn't the most colorful animal. It was brownish, it was greenish, it looked just like the background of the seashore actually. But as I got closer, and we were it was like a celebrity of the trip. Everyone was around her, and we were all just chit-chatting, talking, and at that time, maybe they thought that I was already an expert in clams, but I wasn't actually. So they were asking me all sorts of questions. They were all citizen science volunteers. They were volunteers who have been out on seashores for so many years, and yet, what struck me was that they got so excited about something that they have seen before. But they got even more excited because they thought that I knew more things I could share. So I tried my best. It became like a discussion session, what's this species? What's this animal? Why is it like this? Why is this color and that color? So I tried my best to answer, but that was really memorable. So it was not only just my very first wow sighting of a clam in Singapore, but it sort of became like a milestone for me. That individual followed me through my career for 10 years before she died, because before the animal died because of the global coral bleaching event. So it was quite a sad moment, because after we marked her out, or after we saw her that very first trip in 2008, every single year after that, every trip we go back, we would almost always be paying homage to her. We'll always go there and say, hi, how are you doing? And even if I'm not on the trip, my colleagues would be send photos and say, hey, she's doing well. What do you think? Is she doing fine? Is she healthy? Does she tell us a story about what's happening in the environment? And that kind of continued on. So there were many different kind of connections that I made, connections with my colleagues who, I've been with, known for the many years since we started this journey together as intertidal explorers. The other one would be something that I did as a solo diver. Well, that's not recommended. It was just by accident. I lost my buddy, but there was a very good reason why I lost my buddy, because I encountered a very rare species of clam again as well, and that was actually in Sabah. So I was in one of the biodiversity hotspots in Malaysia, Sabah, Semporna, Sipadan. Some of you might know of these places. So beautiful coral reefs, but I've never been interested in corals anyway. So as much as they're important, they're beautiful, but they're never something that I look at. So I was always on the lookout for something special, and I never, honestly, in my life, and in that period, I never expected to encounter a really rare species of giant clam. It's only found in 3 other places in the world, and that part of Malaysia is one of them. And I swear I was screaming underwater. Of course, nobody could hear me, screaming through my regulator. And I couldn't share my joy with anyone because no one was around me. In fact, actually, before I spotted that individual, I saw a sea turtle. And actually, Sipadan and that area is very well known for sea turtles. So honestly, I have seen a lot of sea turtles over that trip. So it wasn't very. So I was just observing and wondering, okay, what's this sea turtle going to be doing? But just before, in the sort of the foreground, I saw, and I spent the next half an hour just documenting, looking all sorts of things. It's it's just. I never seen it before. So and I think that was what struck me as like one of the awe moments. Until today, I would just tell people that like, yes, I actually saw this very rare species. It's almost like checklist like putting a checklist on like Pokemon. So like, of course, I don't like, there's no Pokemon in the sea, but then, you know, Pokemon of marine animals, it kind of works the same way as well.
I think that's a pretty cool thing, right? Like some of us who love traveling, we collect the number of countries we travel to, and then you as a marine biologist, you collect the number of rare creature sightings that you see on during your journey in your career, right? No, thank you so much for sharing those stories. Mei Ling, you brought up a great point, which is this giant clam that you saw for 10 years. And then 10 years later, she unfortunately passed. And so that was a painful moment for you. And I would imagine in the realm of climate communications, there must be more obstacles than there are no obstacles. So could you share with us like a tip or two in terms of how can we effectively communicate about climate, about its relevance to the businesses that we may be running? Because I think several of us in the room are leading teams, running businesses, trying to change mindsets. In your journey as a science communicator, and you have written 2 books, I really highly recommend you all to reach out to Mei Ling and check out her books. So as a science communicator, what have been 2 tips or 2 hacks you have learned along the way that you could share with us to navigate how really can we help change mindsets?
Yeah, I mean, this is not an easy question, and I think it's something that I'm still on this learning journey. I think the very first one would be something that I shared earlier. I think it's being persistent, persevering, pestering. But I think that helps. Like, I mean, if you passionately, and I won't say passionately, just passionately, but if you truly believe in the current situation that is being, driven by global warming, climate change, and the loss of biodiversity, and etc., I think that should be one of the bigger motivations that help you see through the challenges of talking to various communities, various audience, various people as well. Because if once you give up, then that conversation stops. I think it's about keeping that conversation alive, keep talking about it in whatever context that you're comfortable, in whatever content that you know and are aware as well. And I think that really helps. I think that's the first thing. The second is actually, I realize, is not talking about the issue in your face. In a sense that, like, basically bringing in other stories or other kinds of information. It's a bit like storytelling, but incorporating like why this particular story would be impacted by, say, climate change, by ocean acidification, by bleaching or ocean warming as well. Just as an example is, so recently I worked on this book. In fact, it's actually a children's book. I started, so not just for businesses, but actually, or not just like, I would say corporates and etc. But I started looking at communicating with young children, with kids of my own. They are very impressionable. Like everything I say, they would repeat like a parrot. So it's there's good and bad to it. But they are very moldable. They are very influential as little people. They would go to their classrooms. They would talk to their friends, like little gossip girls sitting there, talking about like what they do, what they see, and what they learn. And I think that was such a powerful message for me, or powerful reflection, that when I was writing this, I started to incorporate the difficult concepts like climate change, like why would climate change affect a sea angel? So some of you might be familiar in the aquariums, the beautiful sea angels, little tiny animals living in very cold waters. So because it's an entirely soft body, when the waters are too warm, they get affected very easily by global warming, etc. And it's just like putting these little stories into short text that children can appreciate and can understand, and by also repeatedly sort of putting the information in different parts of the stories, different parts of the animals. And I think the goal of this is that, like, surely out of the 25 animals here, one of them resonates with them. And I think that was the reflection that I got from parents and friends who have been reading this book to their kids, or kids who have been picking it up. They resonate with an animal, and when they do resonate with an animal, they would take that story much faster and much more easily. And I think we can probably apply it in the same way to your colleagues, to your collaborators, to your clients, is to really capture like the essence of what they find it relatable. And then just sort of bring that narrative of like what's going on with the climate change and climate situations. It's not easy. In fact, I feel like this is an entire study of its own. And I was just sharing with one of the participants earlier is that if I have more time, I would really like to learn and really spend more time in understanding how best to do communications actually.
So persisting in the message, focusing on the essence of the message and bringing in stories that are related to the message. So those are the 2 tips that you are sharing with us. Thank you for that, Mei Ling. And then Ian, over to you. Again, through your medium, what would be 2 tips that you have learned along the way that you could share with us to help us in our communications?
Okay, I think it's really how do we see. Filming is really all about seeing, and it's really how do we see the value of what is right in front of us. And I think regardless of whether I'm a filmmaker or whether she's a scientist, or whether we are working in whatever field that we are in, is really about starting by understanding the greater value of things, and seeing things as interconnected, as an ecosystem. I think that really got me to started to look not just at that entity itself, but really what is its greater value. And I think that to me is like, okay, I'm speaking really vague terms here, but because I came from a building industry, I studied architecture, and of course I can tell you, the value of buildings, and then buildings are great. Why is architecture so amazing? Why are cities so beautiful? And I remember during my trip I went on a couple of different I would say service trips where I would go into rural communities, and then I would help someone to build a structure and all that. But one of the things that really impacted me was I went to this this school in Botswana, and then they had there was a school, and then there was a class, and then they said, with you guys from Singapore who came over, we are going to plant some trees. Botswana is a desert, and I was like, we are planting trees in a desert? So I went up to the teacher. And then I said, how long have you been doing this? He said, 2 years. I said, what happened to the trees last year? Oh, they died. Then I asked her, so why do you want to plant trees? And her response shocked me. She said, why not? And I think that to me really got me to think. Every time when I see something, I will ask myself, why not? And if I were to imagine, and that's how I really start to see the value of things, is that if I imagine a landscape or place without this entity, how would that world look like? And I think it is only through absence and through loss that we start to value that particular object, that particular entity. And because we know that this thing provides for not just us, maybe I could say a personal value, but there are other things that we care about in life that are also suddenly that relationship will trace back to this particular object. Yeah, and I think that to me is really the beautiful the beautiful aspect of nature, is that even though they couldn't when they plant the tree, it might not just be for the tree to survive. It could really be about getting the kid to just put his hands into the soil and understand what the soil is, and then after that seeing what's the life cycle of a tree, even though if it means that the tree would eventually pass, right? But at least the child gets to touch one, and perhaps in due time, they get to build, they get to plant like more and more trees that can actually survive in the desert, and that's what they are currently doing right now in the school. Yeah, so I think it's always really starting by asking the question, why not, and really understanding, if this doesn't exist, how would that impact my own existence? And I think that's really how I hope that different people from all walks of life will start to understand that we are all interconnected. And I think that's also one thing that I feel like when I do films or when I write films, I think it's not really just about seeing the object for what it is, but really all the stories that go along with it. If I were to tell a story about this chair today, I think it's really not so much about the chair, but it's really about the people and the environment that really makes what this chair is today, from its design to its history to its users and everything else all around it. And then that's what really makes this thing so rich and so as something that everybody can connect with. Yeah.
I really love what you just shared with us. Thank you for that. The greater value, the interconnectedness of the things that we do, and I'm just wondering, as we progress on this journey of you bringing more of these stories to life for us, how do you see, through your medium of filmmaking, how do you see delivering impact through the films? And then, as you share that with us, Mei Ling, I will also pose a related question to you, is how do you, it seems to me, Mei Ling, you're very much an educator at heart. And so how then do you see, through your way of educating, that you are delivering impact also as you teach us? So I just want to pose those two questions, and then Ian, you could go first.
Yeah. This is something that I struggle with. It's really like when I make films, people ask me, especially when I want to canvas for funds for a film, people ask me, what's the impact? Like, what's the measurable outcome? And then, there's 3 famous letters called KPI, like what exactly it is.
And then, the ROI.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's another question. That's the one that comes after. So I was like, how do I begin to explain or quantify an outcome? And then I would just say, imagine if you were to meet someone on a date. If you go on a date, you sit down in a cafe, what's the KPI? What's the ROI? Right? You'll never know. But at the end of the conversation, something about you will change. Something about the other person will change. And it depends on how engaging the conversation is. If it's a very engaging conversation, it might change you at a deeper level. It might change your beliefs. It might change the way you see things, to change the values. If it's something that is, really superficial, then maybe at least it changes your mindset that you don't have to meet this person ever again. Yeah, but I think at the very least, that simple conversation is what I solely believe in. That conversation has the power to change every individual. And even if it's a means of just changing one person, it's all worth it. And this person would then go on to then share the same story, that, today I watched a film and it says this, or today I heard a story that says this. And we go around telling these stories from one person to another. And it's kind of like bees, we started to cross-pollinate, and then sooner or later, we then begin to build a collective ideas. And a collective ideas, when it is common, it becomes culture. And I think this is what the Roving Studio is doing, is that I really want to continue to travel so that I can collect different stories from different parts of the world and continue to share them with different people. And the ultimate aim is that there's like a story bank, that people are able to engage with these stories and start to see how, there are so many amazing stories out there. I think we see this through social media, we see this through like magazines and also like YouTube and all that. But I think nothing beats when I'm here personally sharing a story with you. And I think that to me is the most precious thing, the best thing I could do with the time that I have. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Mei Ling, how about you?
I think I've always feel that measuring impact in the work that I do is not so straightforward. It's not about how many people I've spoken to. It's not about also like what information I'm giving, but rather I think it's the connections that I make over time. Like sometimes, like I may not meet you all a lot, but whenever we do, I think that already is an impact. Like I remember you and what you did, and vice versa as well. And I think the other is really just watching. So I do enjoy like watching and observing like colleagues, my children, my family members, and over time, I think what really makes me like continue to be inspired by what I do is seeing that small changes in them. And I think that's also because I serve as a role model in my own community as either a leader or as a follower as well. By persevering in what I believe and doing what I think is right for the environment in this case, and then seeing people so adopting what I do, saying what I say, hopefully it's a good thing, in good ways. I think that is the impact that I'm looking for. It's not just about numbers. It's about, like what Ian says, seeding an idea that's worth spreading. I know I'm using the TED Talks slogan, but it's kind of in that sense as well. And that's what I learned from my time with TED as well, when I was crafting a 5-minute talk with them. And that was one of the key essence is what is the idea that I have that I want to keep spreading. And an idea is such a powerful tool in spreading not just a message, spreading a change in behavior, change in mindset, or even just knowledge, gaining knowledge as well. Yeah, and people have asked me like, so why are you studying clams? Why is it so important? And the information that each of you take back would be very different. Would be either you eat less clams, or when you go see them in diving, you'll be like, oh wow, I remember there was a lady who studies clams and she's obsessed with them. Or it could even just be like, wow, I learned something new about them. They can walk. Like, who knows, right? Who knew
They
that
can?
they could do it? Yeah, they can.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, but that's another story for another time.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And as we reach and arc back this conversation to climate, to communication, it seems like storytelling is the theme that is surfacing. And so, could you then share with us a couple of parting words, or how would you encourage us to go forward and share one idea and share one story, and how would you encourage us to do that? How can we do that better, maybe, if I reframe that question?
I think for me, it's like, don't be afraid to use yourself or myself as an example. When I talk to people, or when I tell stories as well, because the story that you have is the most relatable, it's the most powerful one, because it's something that you go through, you believe, and you want people to know that this is your story. I think many a times when we think of storytelling, sometimes we think about, okay, I'm going to tell someone else's story, but that's not going to be as powerful as using your own story, using your own idea. And it can be something small, it can be something big, it doesn't matter. I think what really matters, it comes from you, it comes from your heart, it comes from your mind.
And I completely agree with that, and I have no better answer than that. Yeah, but it's exactly that yes, really telling it from your own point of view, and how do I feel about it? Because I think one of the most interesting thing about a story, when I watch a story, try this if you were to ever watch a film the next time. Apart from just enjoying the narrative, watch it once for the narrative, the story. Watch it again and ask what was the director thinking when he was writing the story. And then after that, watch it again and ask yourself, what do you think what do you think this story would be for the people around you, the people in your life? And I think that there are three ways of connecting to it. And I think that to me, when I start to tell a story, it's like, what are some of these perspectives that would actually help to reach out to another person? So be it it's a child that is there, how could I get another, someone to understand? And I think people do connect with issues that are like maybe close to them. So I think it's really understanding, bringing it really relatable, so relatable stories, finding relatable angles, to engage with someone. Yeah, and I think there's nothing more relatable than who you are, because we are all humans and we all relate to one another. So I always find that when I watch like a blue chip wildlife film, I tend to fall asleep after 15 minutes of my time just watching it. If I can get through 15 minutes, I should give myself a round of applause. But when I watch something with a story with a lead protagonist in it, right, someone going out there to find wildlife, or let's say if there's a film about Maylin heading out to the shores and then after that looking for this elusive giant clam, I think it'll be more interesting than just a film that just shows the giant clam on our shores. And that to me is because I could actually enter the story from her point of view and then suddenly connect myself through her lens about the entire shore and this very special animal that she resonates so strongly with that I haven't had a chance to resonate with. And it's through her lens that I can begin to then fall in love with this place. And I think that to me is really what storytelling is that I get to share, someone else's story, but through my own experience with that person. Yeah. So every time when I tell a story, I make sure that I'm there. Yeah. And it's not like I don't hear it from someone and then after that I make a film about it, but rather I make sure that I put myself in the situation and then I can begin to then share an authentic view of what I feel the story is about. Yeah.
Wow, I think for all of us who are in the room, I am feeling very inspired because I feel that I am learning several new things from both of your sharings. And it sounds to me that communication at the end of the day comes back to speaking about humanity, speaking from first person, really tapping into what we are each feeling about that narrative, and then maybe do a little bit of homework to identify a couple of other angles of how those narratives might pan out. And at the end of the day, like what both our panelists shared, is circling back to how do we resonate with that piece of information, that piece of content. I think perhaps as we move off from this session, those might be some thoughts that we can think about. And thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much, Mei Ling. Please give them both a round of applause for sharing with us. Thank you.